Welcome, everybody. As Jenna said, my name's Beth, and I am the Prostate Cancer Supportive Care Counselor in Victoria. And I first put this presentation together back in October as we were kind of heading into the winter of the pandemic. And it was like, oh, a lot of my patients are talking about, how this thing is dragging on. And so now, basically, I am constantly adjusting this presentation, like right up to a couple of hours before I'm editing and changing slides, just because of the dynamic nature of the pandemic and how information's coming online pretty much daily. Okay, so my objectives today in this presentation are to cover quite a bit of information. We're going to spend about 10 or 15 minutes. I'll go over some of the main psychosocial concerns that I see in our prostate cancer patients. Then I'm going to discuss some of the psychosocial concerns that we see surfacing due to the pandemic. And then we'll shift gears for the next, 20 or 30 minutes and talk all about resiliency. What is it? Why is it important? And how do I get more of it? And then we'll swing into about 15 or 20 minutes I've got available for questions, thoughts, and everything else. So let's just dive right in. And as Jenna says, if questions or ideas or thoughts come to you, jot them down so that we can go back and revisit them when we open things up for discussion. And again, I'm adjusting my volume and sort of speaking a bit louder, so hopefully everything is okay. Again, just chat if you're having a hard time with technology. Put it in the chat box, please, and thanks. So when we talk about prostate cancer, we being those of us in the cancer world, we talk about something called the cancer continuum. And if you can envision, this blue line is actually like a continuum. And in the cancer experience, you are going to go through various phases of that continuum. And right at the front is the diagnostic and treatment planning phase. And this is the phase where you're running around having tests and scans. There's a lot of back and forth, different specialists being involved. It can be a highly distressing time where everybody's trying to sort out what's going on and get a sense of what your disease is, where it is, and then how to start shaping and creating an actual treatment plan for your particular cancer diagnoses. When that shift happens, you shift into the treatment phase. And so you've come out of that kind of back and forth. What is this? What stage am I? What kind of treatment options are available? And you swing into the treatment phase. And that's the phase where you kind of have your marching orders. You either get a surgery date or a radiation date, or perhaps you're starting some ADT, androgen deprivation therapy. There's a real shift. You've got kind of something in your hand that tells you, hey, I've got something to do here now. I'm not just kind of tossed around between all these healthcare professionals. This can be a phase where people really feel they're doing something about their cancer. And then further along on that cancer continuum, that prostate cancer continuum, you head into post-treatment, into survivorship. And this is a real transition, a real phase. Perhaps you have had a surgery, you've done a stint of ADT, or you've had radiotherapy, and you transition now into a phase where maybe the team has been able to beat that cancer into submission and put it in remission, drive down that PSA, and you're starting to live now more kind of in the normalcy of your life, but also with this thing hanging over you. Is it going to come back? How long will this phase last? So this is an actual phase in the cancer continuum, and we'll dive into that a little bit more. At any point along any of these areas, you could experience recurrence. In fact, your front end experience could be based on recurrence. Maybe you've been disease-free for 10 years and oops, got to go back and start something new. Or maybe the disease has spread, you've finished a round of treatment, you've had some period of time disease-free, and now it's metastatic. And as you can imagine, there are actually significantly different experiences at each phase. Now, it's not like they don't cross over. This isn't entirely a linear process, but there are certain experiences we see over and over in each of the phases. And as I'm speaking to you today, you're going to be running my presentation through your own lens, through where you are on this cancer continuum. Maybe you are just at the front end with new diagnosis. So you're going to have some of these new diagnosis experiences. Or maybe you're in the middle of treatment, just slogging it out through a long process of radiation therapy. You're going to be relating to some of those treatment experience as well as what you've already experienced earlier on. And then maybe you're finished your treatments, but you're now going, what now? Who am I? Into survivorship. Okay, so just bear in mind that although I'm doing a general presentation, it's going to really resonate for each of you very individually based on where you are in the continuum. So some of the things that I see at the front end at that diagnostic and treatment planning phase are really common and really normal. It doesn't mean they feel good, but they can be experiences like this. You might feel like you're in shock. You might feel fear and uncertainty. Like, what are you talking about? My test? Are you sure? Maybe you feel anger or sadness. You know, maybe you were ready to retire, but not quite yet. And now the disease has forced you into early retirement. So you could have quite a number of very complex emotions surging through you. Or conversely, you could actually feel quite numb. Like, I don't feel anything at all. I'm just kind of sitting here and this guy's mouth is moving across from me. Or maybe you feel confusion, just that sense again, like I spoke about. Are you sure you're talking about me? Like, I'm as healthy as a horse. I eat well, I don't do this, I do that. So all of these experiences are normal, and that doesn't mean that they feel good, but it's just important to realize, no, you're not going crazy. You're not losing your mind. This is a real shock to the system to get this prostate cancer diagnosis. It's really common at the front end that you may need some support to organize yourselves around getting treatment. Maybe you need to travel in from somewhere outside of the Lower Mainland. You need to stay somewhere. Maybe you need to make travel plans. If you're going to be coming to the center every day for 5 or 6 weeks, you have to organize. Can I drive? Can my friend or spouse drive me? There can be a lot of real practical pieces also at this front end, alongside of that very intense wallop to the system that I've talked about, where you feel at the same time just kind of overwhelmed by it all. I often say that the cancer world is like a well-oiled machine, and a prostate cancer diagnosis basically inserts you into this machine that is constantly moving. So it can have a bit of a conveyor belt feeling where it's like, okay, I'm going for that test and I have to show up for this blood work, and then I have that consultation. And these are all to be expected. I often say that during this period, having this cancer experience is really your full-time job. Just learning how to live with it and how to get treatment for it and how to attend all of these really important appointments. But this isn't something you're doing kind of around the outside edges of your normal life. This becomes your life for a while. It's your full-time job. And it's really easy to feel intimidated and overwhelmed with just the sheer volume of information that you're receiving. And intimidated because you're coming into close contact with many professionals, you know, with urologists and radiologists and medical oncologists and surgeons and counselors and nutritionists, and it's enough to, you know, to make your head spin if mostly you probably haven't had much to do with the medical world. Maybe you saw your doc every few years. So it can, you know, feeling overwhelmed is also really a normal experience during this phase. A lot of what I'm talking about is tied into what happens to the body, the physiology of the body when you get a cancer diagnosis. And we talk a lot about the acute stress response in psychosocial care, in counseling care. When you're diagnosed with cancer, the physiology of the body is going to respond, because that word cancer, it packs a wallop. It's a terrifying word, and the body can understandably go into like a fight or flight response. That if you've heard of those terms, that's what we're talking about when we talk about the acute stress response. It's really the body's unconscious response to feeling under threat. And anytime we hear that word cancer, often our mind goes right to the worst case scenario. I'm going to die from this thing. And so often the process is to kind of wind back from that and really drill down and see the reality of your experience. But at first, unconsciously, the body goes into that acute stress response. As I say, it is a very, very common experience. And it's as you see what I've written down here, helping patients to learn how to regulate that response and regulate the nervous system is one of the key focuses that we focus on in counseling, is to help patients learn, how do I get myself out of this heightened arousal state and down into a more calm and relaxed state. Because interestingly, at the very time you're trying to integrate a whole bunch of information, your brain, the prefrontal cortex, goes offline with this fight or flight response. And so it's understandable. I have patients like Beth, the doc said something to me, in one ear, out the other, and I'm like, yeah, that's the fight or flight response. That's why we repeat ourselves a lot, and you're going to need to hear things over and over, because you're coming out of that arousal state into sort of integrating this and getting back into the more rest and digest, relaxed state in the nervous system as time goes on. I'm just introducing this little life hack. I've got a 5-minute video that I'll send out to Jenna, and then she can email to you guys, that teaches diaphragmatic breathing. That is the #1 way to come out of that acute stress response, the fight or flight response, and down into the rest and digest response. The nervous system has 2 sides, the sympathetic branch and the parasympathetic branch. The sympathetic branch is that distressed fight or flight, and the parasympathetic branch is the relaxed, slow breathing, I can process information side of the nervous system. So we like to get patients that tool into the toolkit right away. And I've often will say to a patient right off the bat, I'm going to send you a video. I want you to practice it every day. It's just 5 minutes, but it's helping to train the body to come down into that deeper diaphragmatic breathing and just to settle down that acute stress response. And that, of course, is something that's kind of a theme through the whole presentation today. Let's say that, you know, you've been working with your healthcare providers and they've hammered out a treatment plan in agreement with you with consent, and you've kind of swung out of that diagnostic and treatment planning phase into active treatment. Say, for example, you've had to start ADT and you're a month or two into that and you're getting your dates and times for a round of radiotherapy, or maybe you've got a date coming up for surgery. Maybe those other options aren't your path. Regardless, you've got your marching orders and you know what's coming for you in terms of treatment. Often there can be financial and economic concerns that we see surface in patients at this time. Maybe you've had to leave work, and so you'll get in touch with us in counseling to find out what kind of programs are available. Maybe you want to access CPP disability for the short term. Maybe you need some support looking at if your employer provides some support if you have a long stint of treatment ahead of you. So these are really normal and common concerns. Doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. This is basically why we exist, to help you navigate some of these pointy edges during this process. You're often going to be experiencing grief and loss. And I talk a lot about the non-death losses. Maybe you had some plans, you were going to go do something, and whoosh, the rug's been pulled out from under you. Now, as you can already see, we've got the overlay of COVID here, and I haven't even started talking about it. Nonetheless, you may have had plans, even perhaps you wanted to start a renovation on your house, or you were going to move, and everything just kind of has to get shelved for a while you immerse yourself into treatment. This is a big one, this transition in roles. Maybe you've always been the healthy guy in partnership, you know, maybe you've been a care provider for a spouse or a family member, and all of a sudden you're a patient. That can be a real shock to the system. And it takes time to wrap your head around being a patient for a while. It is a role, and doesn't mean you need to have that role for your whole life, but you transition into that role for a period of time during treatment for sure. Often patients have concerns starting to surface around the side effects during treatment. You know, we talk a lot about prostate cancer and the implications in identity, male identity, intimacy, sexuality, how men make sense of themselves in the world. And there can be very profound changes to that given some of the treatments, the androgen deprivation therapy, or a round of radiotherapy, or even surgery in the short term. So some of these side effects start to surface, and I know you guys know we have modules to talk about kind of the medical side of those things and how to support yourself. And counseling can help you to make sense of the emotional, psychological, and relational side of the side effects of some of the treatments. Even if they're transient, they are absolutely deserving of your attention. And again, during treatment, we're talking about those changing roles and routines. You know, I mean, you're, like I say, if you look at this journey as a full-time job for a while, that's a pretty big change to anybody's routine. It's like, I've said, you know, this is like a short-term gig. And one of my patients said, yeah, but I didn't apply for this gig. And I'm like, absolutely, you're right. You're kind of being pulled into this new routine. There can often be fatigue in the cancer experience in general, and especially in prostate cancer, just given some of the treatment modalities and how they impact quality of life in terms of fatigue and feeling robust. And again, often they're very transient, but even something that's a few months long can feel very profoundly impacting on quality of life. We often say prostate cancer is the relationship cancer because, as I touched on, it just really impacts those deeper areas of intimacy and male sexuality and the expression of love within partnership. And of course, this absolutely is equally as important if you're a single man, because you're curious about these issues as well as you think about relationship in the future or how to navigate that path. And again, this is one of the domains where counseling can be really, really beneficial, just to have some time and space and privacy and confidentiality to discuss these really important issues and concerns. As you transition out of active treatment into that survivorship phase, you can kind of feel like this gentleman standing here on the open road with just kind of wide open space. Now what does all this mean? You know, you're entering in the phase of what I call picking up the pieces and rebuilding your life and putting things back together, the new you that includes the old you and also includes the cancer experience now as well, and all that comes along with that. And this phase as well is a process. And this continuum that I've touched on today, just very, very briefly, I mean, truly, we could do a deeper dive in any one of these portions. I could do a whole presentation on any singular area on that continuum because of what comes along with that experience. So I'm really aware that the presentation today has kind of a tapas bar approach. I'm just sprinkling a few ideas, and then we're going to cover some issues from the pandemic, and realizing, wow, the interplay here between these two issues, as if one isn't more than enough, right? So as you transition, you know, out of active treatment, and even if you're on like a maintenance treatment, say you have to be on ADT for maintenance, perhaps you're really kind of not having that many consultations with us at the Cancer Center. Maybe a lot has been deferred back to your GP or your urologist. You're not coming to the center for treatment. You're not availing yourself of all the resources because maybe you've returned to work, or you're trying to build more normalcy back into your life and have cancer kind of shrink from being that full-time focus. And these are the kinds of questions that people come to my office with. Now what? Who am I now? Or, you know, what just happened to me? What was that? I mean, it's a massive disruption of identity, of self-identity, of who you knew yourself to be. So like I say, it takes time to rebuild yourself after a cancer experience. The fear of progression and the fear of recurrence, these are real fears that travel with the prostate cancer experience. You're not doing anything wrong. The challenge and the call to action is how to live with those fears so that they don't take up the whole bandwidth. You've got to come into relationship with the fact that you've lost innocence. Yes, crappy things do happen. And at the same time, learn to trust life again. That's really the heart of survivorship and post-treatment, is how do I reclaim my trust in life, and recognizing that not great things can happen. There can be profound and lasting changes to sexual health, all of them workable. However, they do sometimes really need work, and our team can support you in that so that you can deepen your ability to share intimacy and partnership. And there could be possible long-term side effects from treatments that impact urinary and bowel function if you've had a long range of radiotherapy. All the plumbing and sexual organs are kind of very close together, so there's a lot implicated in the treatment process for this cancer. And as much as treatments have come a very long way and there's a lot more targeted focus, there's also often some side effects that need support so that men can come through those. So, I mean, like I say, I've really spoken to that quite quickly, because we're also talking about all of you navigating these passages while going through a once in a lifetime global pandemic. So what I say to my prostate patients is, you've kind of gotten some weird upside down 2-for-1 deal, 2-for-1 stress and also 2-for-1 resiliency. Because my prostate cancer patients are resilient. And in fact, a lot of you have said, hey, when the pandemic came, I already knew how to deal with uncertainty. I already knew how to deal with change and things changing all the time. And for some of you, the pandemic came first and then your cancer diagnosis. So I'm really aware, of course, that I'm kind of presenting this in a linear way, but for you, the pandemic may have been first and you were diagnosed in August or July. So just be aware that your own unique experience influences the overlay of these two very major stressful events. Okay. And if you can, remember some of the things that I touched on in the first part about the psychosocial concerns around prostate cancer, because you're going to see them surfacing during our discussion, my discussion here on COVID, and especially the implications for that chronic aroused state of the acute stress response. So what do we know so far? We know that just over a year ago, towards the end of December in 2019, in Wuhan, the municipality of Wuhan in the province of Hubei in China, doctors and hospitals noticed a cluster of pneumonia-like cases. And towards the end of December, they sent their first data up to the World Health Organization for to get the World Health Organization apprised of what they were noticing. And that's actually why the 19 is in COVID-19, because really right under the wire, those cases were registered at the international level for further understanding. And a novel coronavirus was shortly identified at that time. And we all watched it kind of come online from afar. If you remember, in January and February, it was sort of over there. First, it was over there in China, and then it was over there in Europe. And it was kind of like this wave that we were watching move across the globe. And truly, literally, by the time the World Health Organization declared the global pandemic in March of last year, it was just basically starting to land on our shores. We had a few smattering of cases in January and February, but it was mid-March this time last year when the hammer dropped and we went into full, wow, what is this? Remember that happened. And Dr. Bonnie took to the airwaves and the TV waves, and the economy was pretty much shut down. I mean, not totally, but we couldn't go to restaurants. We were all, go home, stay home, do your shopping, do your essential business. Don't see anybody outside of your bubble. If you can really wrap your head around this is only 1 year ago, although in some ways it also feels totally like an eternity. Profound restrictions to freedom of movement were introduced to normal life. And this has really been the major impact on us psychosocially, who we could see or couldn't see, where we could go or couldn't go, whether that's in our neighborhoods, our friends, or in the broader community, traveling. And with the freedoms we've always cherished to come and go as we please. Travel curtailed, borders closed, physical isolation, and closely on the heels, social isolation. In those early months, we saw some of this on our social media feeds or in the news. Wildlife coming back to take over cities, as the globe just really tried to sort itself out and figure out, what is this thing? What is going on? And we don't have bighorn sheep on our streets any longer because we have opened things up and we've come a long way to learn how to live alongside of this thing, but we are nowhere near normal yet. But these slides were just really to spark your memory of those early first few months where we were literally all in those really cloistered environments. And of course, those still continue to large measure. This is something I like to point out. The province of BC has actually been in an ongoing state of emergency since March 20th, 2020. Now, it's the powers that come along with that for the government are quite extraordinary, and governments don't declare states of emergency unless things are very significant, like a tsunami or wildfires or earthquake. And usually it's for 2-week periods, maybe for a couple of periods at a time. But as I read in one journal article, the COVID pandemic is kind of like a slow motion ongoing earthquake, like the ground is always moving. And hence, really, as of this week, we are coming up to 1 year consistently and continually that the province has been in an ongoing state of emergency. So that just underscores that even though in some ways things kind of look normal out there, but not really, but sort of, no, we are in a continuing state of emergency and uncertainty. The ongoing restrictions, both in travel as well as in our physical restrictions. And no, this is not the new normal, okay? We're not going to be here forever. We are, however, living through a time of continued ongoing uncertainty. So just be very, very careful that you don't normalize this period of time. It is an uncertain time, and so nobody's behaving like we usually do post or pre-pandemic. And this is how we can tell, right? Like we've got masks and you have to make your appointment for your, haircuts or doctor, clinics. You can't even just walk in. You have to make appointments. We see these signs everywhere. We don't see a whole lot of traffic on the streets, either by foot or by cars. And yet at some ways it can feel normal because you can get a haircut or you can walk down a street. But at the same time, it's all happening within the context of this very abnormal ongoing pandemic. Ongoing health crisis. And like I say, I just update these last few slides as close as I come to the date. The last time I did this in February, we had 2 vaccines approved. Now we have 3. And we also have 2 more on the horizon that weren't spoken about. The Johnson & Johnson, looking to be approved very soon. Novavax, we've got a contract with them. This is new since I first gave this presentation. And in fact, vaccines are new since I first gave the presentation in November. That was something in the future. So that just underscores, yeah, okay, this is a very dynamic, fluid process. And this is the very most recent, extending the timeline between doses based, of course, on science. And that's really the power of science, is lifetime data as best as we can get it. That's informing decisions. We have some phenomenal scientists at BC CDC and throughout the country. And then now from kind of like that psychosocial place, what are we seeing? We're seeing an increase in anxiety and depressive symptoms across all scales since the start, and they just continue. An increase in substance abuse, an increase in stress related to continued uncertainty. When is this thing going to end? Pandemic fatigue, which we can also call a measure of adrenal fatigue, which is when that acute stress response has been in a state of constant activation, dropping the adrenaline and cortisol into the bloodstream after an extended period of time. That's not really the function of that acute stress response, but if it's prolonged and activated, that's going to make you tired because the body just isn't used to being in a chronic heightened state of activation like that. Of course, loneliness is real, and that's piling on. The continued social isolation, we're seeing increases in demoralization. And I could have amended this because we're also starting to see hope surfacing, just given that vaccine supplies coming online. We might even know someone, each of us individually, someone who's been vaccinated. And even with emerging variants of concern, we know that scientists are working tirelessly to try to push back against those kinds of things. So as you can see, there's plenty of stressors between having a prostate cancer diagnosis and living through the pandemic at the same time, right? I mean, one of these would be more than plenty, as I say. And that really brings us to the heart and soul of my presentation today, which is around this topic of resiliency. And we hear that word quite a bit. It's like and you're especially seeing it now quite a bit more, people need to be resilient and have resiliency. And so it's a timely issue to explore because it's actually about empowering yourself to feel strong during times of stress and challenge. So as we shift gears from kind of out there, you'll notice the first 20 or 30 minutes here I've talked about prostate cancer. That's an out there thing that happened to you. COVID pandemic, out there thing that's happened to you. We're going to make a really big shift now internally where we're going to start to notice, hey, there's actually quite a bit of power inside of me in spite of these external stressors. And that's really the heart and soul of resiliency. So my program for the next bit will be, what is resiliency? Why is it important? And most importantly, how do I get more of it? So I love this definition. What is resiliency? Well, we can look at it as the process of adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, threats, or during times of significant ongoing stress. Okay? The process of adapting well. Yeah, I adapt. That's the key word. Okay? This is the heart and soul of resiliency, is we're not rigid in the face of challenges. We move and bend and adapt. And what I really like about this definition is it talks about kind of like one-offs, maybe like an earthquake or a flood, but also of significant ongoing stress, which really captures both the experience of prostate cancer and the pandemic. Let's just have a little look at this slide. What we're talking about here are the what. Okay, we know what is resiliency. Okay, it's that adapting process. Tell me more about it. What is it? Well, these are the core concepts that I believe make up resiliency. The first one is, you know, I'll just start anywhere. I'll start up here. It's really that sense of perseverance. And sometimes all that is putting one foot in front of the other, but nonetheless, you haven't curled up and pulled the covers over your head. You're literally getting up, putting your feet on the floor and putting one foot in front of the other. Persevering during challenge is a concept of resiliency. So all of you have this already. Optimism is, it doesn't have to be rainbows and unicorns. It's just more of a sense of, you know, things will get better. This isn't like this forever. And we can certainly lose our optimism for a while. That's to be expected. But it's a general idea that can be a trait that we can develop to be more optimistic in the face of challenges. Often if we have a sense of competency somewhere in our lives, maybe professionally or in our relationships, places where we have a sense of feeling good and competent, we draw on that as a source of resiliency. It means, yeah, I know how to achieve things or accomplish goals or set goals and do them. They don't have to be pie in the sky. They're just areas of our life that we all have that we can draw on during challenging times. And with perseverance, you'll also see this theme of tenacity, just kind of keeping at it. Doesn't mean you have to be feeling all excited and highly motivated, but you just keep going. Sometimes that's all we can ask of ourselves, is to just keep going. It can really help to develop this internal locus of control. And this is so important. I'll go into that deeper in my presentation, so I'll jump over that, but that's key. It's really helpful to develop emotional awareness and some measure of tolerance for stress and emotional feelings. Like, whoa, I feel sad about that cancer diagnosis and I'm processing emotions around that. Or I'm feeling really frustrated that I can't travel and go and see my friends in the States or my son in Ontario. And to be able to have contact with that emotional realm and give voice to it and talk through it is a way of increasing resiliency. And again, social support, competence, relationships. This is why we talk about resiliency being, it's not something we do in a vacuum. We lean on each other. You may reach out to a counselor or a good friend or your partner or each other. You know, you guys find great support and comfort in each other, in your stories and your strengths. And this is a measure of how we improve and increase resiliency, by increasing the depth of our social contacts, which of course are challenged in some ways because of the pandemic. So why does it matter? Well, developing resiliency empowers us to see the role and responsibility that we have in improving the quality of our life, regardless of those external circumstances, okay? Regardless of them, we still have power and agency. Improving our resiliency can help to protect us against becoming demoralized. And resiliency helps us to continue to persevere in the face of challenges and difficulties. And they kind of are a bit of a feedback loop there of the slide I just showed. And now my presentation, we're going to swing into the how, and we'll do a deeper dive as I go through these. So how do I improve my resiliency? This is really the key area, and we'll go into it deeper. You're going to learn to focus on what you can control rather than focusing on what you can't control. And it kind of may seem like a no-brainer, and you're going, yeah, that's pretty obvious, Beth, but you'd be surprised how many times the mind brain goes out trying to control things outside of our control, and hence increasing feelings of helplessness and powerlessness. So developing tools to remember, what can I control here, is really important. This is another important piece from a philosophical side of things. Develop that philosophical understanding that life actually includes challenges and suffering. We don't have to go out looking for it. Life is going to serve it up. And it doesn't mean we're doing anything wrong. It's part and parcel of what comes with this human body and this human existence. And because we've all grown up in this blessed country, in this province, with many advantages and privileges, we may not have had a lot of experience with difficulties. We haven't lived possibly through wars or other challenges. So it's really important just to start to expand that cognitive framework of life to include the reality that life actually includes suffering and challenges. And it doesn't mean we're doing anything wrong. And it doesn't mean we need to build a house there. These are suffering and challenges are neighborhoods that we go through in life, but we don't have to build a house in those neighborhoods. And then we increase our resiliency by repeatedly recognizing and exercising the power that we have in shaping our world through the 3 domains of our lived experience, which encompass our thoughts, our feelings, and our actions. Now, just talking about that internal locus of control, this is a shorthand language that you're going to be able to take away from today, where you can check in with yourself going, am I looking at this from an internal locus of control or an external locus of control? So if you're looking at things from an external place, these are the kinds of phrases you might find yourself using. Oh, there's nothing I can do about my future. Why bother? Why does everything happen to me? You know, we could go on. It's that sense of, why did I get diagnosed? And, you know, that I had no control over that, and that sucks. In an externally focused position, things happen to you. and they act upon you, like the COVID experience, like the prostate cancer experience. And it's very normal right away to feel some of these feelings, absolutely. But as you can see, it's a very demoralized and deflated place to stay too long. The place of power is claiming responsibility to the circumstances and then doing everything you can to improve your life. I say to all my prostate cancer patients, you are not responsible for the diagnosis. However, you are responsible to the diagnosis. And that's where your power is, with that internal locus of control. How do I improve my life? I can determine to large measure my future. I can partner with my oncologist and hammer out a treatment plan I feel good about. I can do a Zoom session with my grandson in Toronto, even though I want to climb on a plane. I'm going to make the best of this. I make things happen. That's the defining shift out of being externally focused, things happening to you, to internally focused. Okay, this has happened. Now, what can I do to improve my life, to support myself during this very challenging time? And you do that by starting to develop this inner focus from not being out there, all these things are happening out there in the world, but beginning to develop the ability to check in with yourself. Oh, how am I feeling, doing, thinking? I'm turning from an external locus to internal. What's happening inside of me? What am I feeling? What am I thinking? How am I behaving? Am I taking care of myself, or am I doing things that are kind of bad for my mental health? An internal locus of control, developing an internal locus of control, is the belief that the quality of one's life, whether good or bad, is highly influenced by your personal efforts, your attitude, your thoughts, your behaviors, feelings, and actions. Okay, and remaining externally focused is the belief that the quality of your life, whether good or bad, is primarily caused by forces outside of your control, external events or the behaviors of others. Life would be just perfect if I didn't get this cancer diagnosis. Life would be just perfect if COVID didn't happen. Well, the cancer diagnosis has happened. Well, the pandemic has happened. So how can you reclaim that sense of self agency and empowerment, even in light of those external places? Okay. You can see I kind of go on about this topic because it's really the foundation of resiliency, over and over and over. And then, as I touched on, these three domains of our lived experience, this is the area of your agency and your power. It has to do with the thoughts that you're thinking, the emotions that you're experiencing, and the behaviors that you engage in. And taken in totality, I use the acronym TEB. And this is an acronym from cognitive behavior therapy. TEB equals you. It equals each of us. We are kind of a conglomerate of our thoughts and emotions and behaviors. And our place of potency is in learning about these domains so that we can intervene on our own behalf in a positive way. I mean, just a really super brief shorthand of behavior. I know when during the US election, I was up late at night on the Twitter feed waiting for seeing who was going to win. And it was like 2 a.m. and I have to get up the next day for work. And I should have gone to bed, but I was behaving in a behavior that was not beneficial to my well-being, but, it was short term and I was interested. But that's just kind of an example of what I mean when I talk about behaviors. They don't have to be highfalutin. They're often very meat and potatoes ways that we can change up our behaviors and improve our resiliency and support ourselves. I appreciate all the comments coming in, and we'll just keep collecting those for the question and answer period. The thoughts and emotions and behaviors, as you can see in these slides, they interact with each other. It's not linear or even circular. It's kind of back and forth. What we think impacts how we feel impacts what we do, and vice versa. And it's okay to kind of intervene on our own behalf in a counseling session or with a loved one or a trusted friend, and explore the behaviors you're engaging in, or what kind of thoughts you're thinking, or what kind of emotions you're feeling. I'm just going to break down very briefly, just do a little bit of a deeper dive. So say, for example, you did want to explore the thoughts you're having about your cancer experience, about the pandemic and other stressors. These are some questions you can ask yourself. Are the thoughts that I'm having helpful or useful? Are they even true? Are these thoughts making me more stressed? These are kind of quite powerful interventions. You can put these on little Post-it notes and stick them around the house, or check in with yourself. Am I on a runaway train of woulda, coulda, shoulda, or worst case scenario? Am I making myself more stressed with the things I'm thinking about? Are the things I'm thinking even true? Because that's a big one if we get into worst case scenario thinking. So just the act of starting to realize, hey, I actually have some measure of control to some extent about what goes on in here, or at least I can work with it. If you do notice that you're feeling discouraged or a bit demoralized or overwhelmed, here's just a few little takeaways that are phrases that I encourage all my patients to start building into their lexicon. Look, this is challenging, and I'm able to do challenging things. Hey, I may not be able to control this situation. However, to large measure, I can control my response to this situation. And then activate some deep breathing, settle yourself down. This is a way to take that internal locus of control and not be pulled around by the externalities of life. All I need to do is just take this one step at a time. That's probably my all-time favorite. It just helps us to immediately break things down to little bite-sized pieces. The goal with this kind of work, and again, I'll have some resources you can explore after, but this is working in the cognitive domain. The goal of this kind of work would be to increase your ability to tame and work with the mind and thoughts, rather than being dragged around by what we call automatic negative thoughts, or ants. And you can just imagine them scurrying every which way, dragging you around with worst case scenarios and all sorts of awfulizing. So learning cognitive tools helps you to go, hey, this is a source of power I can learn about. But the first step to becoming aware of your own thoughts is to begin to turn that attention inward and to observe and notice the workings of your mind, just by that literal kind of checking in. What am I thinking right now? That's as complex as that first task is. Turn the attention in. What am I thinking about here? Lots of great programs to help support working in the cognitive domain. And again, I'll send lots of those to Jenna. I'm going to shift now into that emotional domain as we move through these realms. We can enter our lived experience through our emotional experience. We don't maybe have to go, what am I thinking about something? We could also ask ourselves, what am I feeling right now? And that's another way of increasing agency, is developing what we call emotional literacy, the ability to know yourself internally with you around your emotions. And these are the primary colors of the emotions. Am I feeling happy? Am I feeling sad, afraid, angry? And just pausing for a bit and checking in with yourself. These are all different emotions, and they all provide feedback to you about very important needs in your life, that if a need's getting met, chances are you're going to feel happy. If a need is not getting met, chances are you'll be feeling something around these feelings, okay? Feelings, as I say, they point to needs and wants. They're not just kind of, this cauldron of weirdness inside of us. They're data and feedback. And it's best to express emotions and keep working through them kind of currently as they arise, rather than let them build up and then they kind of come out sideways or blow the pressure cooker. And that's all about developing that resiliency skill of emotional literacy. What am I feeling? What do I need right now? Good to share with a friend or a counselor if this is a domain you want more support on to understand with all these stressors. Feelings point to needs. You can see here you're observing your feeling, you're naming it. Oh, it looks like there's some sadness here. Maybe the need is for social connection, and especially during COVID and maybe with the prostate experience, you're feeling isolated. So you need to reach out and ask someone, give me a call, let's talk. That's a way of getting your need met. That's going to change your feeling. Validate your feelings and let go of the shame around them. We have a weird culture around feelings. As I say, they're very good information for you in terms of what your needs and wants are. And I just briefly want to touch on, this slide talks about the areas of our human needs. We have needs for meaning, needs for community. We have needs for love. We have needs for clarity, needs for power, needs for safety, for play, for equality, needs for empathy, needs for sustenance, that should say. These are our core needs: food, water, shelter. But especially in the cancer experience, you need to feel some measure of power in the treatment choices. You don't want to just feel like you're being dragged along. So if you're not feeling as though you're in partnership with your oncologist, you may be feeling frustrated or angry, like it's all happening too fast. And counseling can help you kind of unpack some of that and help you to focus on, hey, I need to feel more like a partner and feel more empowered in this process. Meaning is a huge piece. And when we get a cancer diagnosis, a prostate cancer diagnosis, we have to reformat what matters to us, how to contribute, what is our purpose, especially going through the slogs of treatment and getting through the difficult days and months. And then we can also enter this area of resiliency with behaviors. And this is key. Start small, start low, go slow, take small steps. So some of the behavior domains, right? You can start to ask yourself, are the behaviors I'm engaging in helping me or hurting me, right? Am I sitting in front of Fox News or even CNN or even CBC for hours on end? Maybe I should take a break from that and watch something a little more uplifting. Or maybe I should get out into the backyard and just enjoy the birdies flying around. This is, again, this area of resiliency where we remember we have agency to change how we behave, to support ourselves. This is the key question. What do I need to do for myself in order to improve my being and increase resiliency. So with thoughts and feelings, those are internal experiences, and they lead us to the action orientation. We start to operationalize things to bring different behaviors into our life. Here are some behaviors that do help our well-being and increase our resiliency. Consistently learning a practice to regulate that acute stress response, developing like a breathing, a mindfulness practice. Exercise, even moderate or mild exercise, just getting around and out the block. Connecting with others, really key. Eating well, doesn't have to be, top drawer 24/7, but on average, on measure, I'm eating better than not eating better. Learn new skills, which is what you're doing today. This is building your resiliency. The very fact that you signed up for this course is already a testament of your resiliency. Making your resiliency and your well-being a priority is key. Don't just leave it to chance, like, oh, maybe I'll do all right. Prioritize your well-being. There's a phrase, self-care. You've probably heard it a lot, and it kind of does a disservice because it's actually self-care in service of developing resiliency. It's not just something frou-frou-y to do for yourself, whatever. These are actually ways we increase our resiliency by caring for ourselves. And connection with others is absolutely crucial, especially in light of these physical distance requirements. So I say to people, even though it's Zoom, even though it's phone, get it on the calendar, get a conversation going, get a Zoom chat with a family member going. I know it's not the same as in real life, but it's really important. Developing that present focus, mindfulness, pursuing actions that provide us meaning, because that comes back to that need of meaning. And this is really big. Monitor and limit your media and news intake. Again, that internal locus of control, shutting it off. I'm in control of how much goes in there. Developing the gratitude attitude. We are biologically hardwired with a negative bias for survival. If we hear a crinkling sound in a bush or see a rainbow, we're going to be more focused on that sound in the bush because it could be a threat to our survival. So we have to develop that muscle that also takes note of the rainbow and the beautiful nature surrounding us, okay? Because this is kind of the heart and soul of resiliency. It actually, life doesn't get easier or more forgiving. We actually get stronger and more resilient. I didn't make up that saying, that's Dr. Maraboli, but he's a big name in resiliency. So I think I probably went over a few minutes, but my intention today really is just to start planting seeds and getting your wheels going. Take a few takeaways. Like I say, I've got some resources to send to Jenna, and I hope that when we open it up for question and answer, we can have more of a back and forth and hear what resonated for you, and also if you have questions or thoughts or ideas to add to the mix here. And this slide just tells you about the prostate cancer in Vancouver. Of course, you know about that. There's the phone number for BC Cancer in Vancouver and the Prostate Cancer Foundation number. This is my contact info. You can also get me through Jenna or through the program here in Victoria.